Your degree isn't exactly relevant anymore, Evelyn. Richard Cole said it casually, chewing gum like it offended him personally. His silver pen tapped the conference table in a steady, arrogant rhythm. Across the room sat finance, HR, marketing, even two facilities managers who clearly wished they were anywhere else. No one laughed. No one defended her either. Evelyn Hart didn't react. She sat upright, hands folded neatly in her lap, ankles crossed. The faint scar on her left thumb caught the morning light, earned years ago rewiring a collapsing legacy system, at 1:12 a.m., during a merger panic no one else remembered. But she did. Richard continued. My son's stepping into leadership next quarter anyway. We need people who understand modern systems, not whatever ivory tower nonsense you learned 10 years ago. Still, Evelyn didn't blink. Instead, she reached for her notepad, clicked her pen once, and, out of sight beneath the table, pressed record on the small, innocent-looking key fob clipped to her laptop bag. Company policy said nothing about personal keychains. This wasn't new. It had started with jokes. Thanks, Professor, when she presented a risk framework. A comment in an all-hands meeting about her probably using a typewriter. Then the Slack message, too long, didn't read, sent in reply to a 3-line compliance brief. HR thanked her for raising visibility. Translation, nothing happened. Then came the quiet cuts. Calendar invites she was accidentally left off. Budget audits questioning numbers she'd kept under control for 3 straight years. A reorg Richard proudly called cross-functional streamlining. Her title changed from Director of Systems Strategy to Legacy Process Lead. What does that even mean? Someone asked. Richard smirked. She keeps the old stuff alive. Like a janitor. Evelyn nodded, accepted the title, and said nothing. Because real systems don't collapse loudly. They rot slowly, unseen, until the basement floods and everyone panics. Evelyn had been the label on the fuse box for 9 years. She was the reason the company survived the 2019 migration disaster, fixing it barefoot at home, with a dying VPN, and one string of emergency commands that shouldn't have worked, but did. Now she watched Richard swing authority he didn't understand, showing off for his son, Logan Cole. Logan hadn't written a line of code in his life, yet leaned back and laughed. I think you're just scared of innovation, Evelyn. Scared? No. Scared was 2015, alone, praying a security patch wouldn't destroy the mainframe over a holiday weekend. This wasn't fear. This was theater. And quietly, methodically, Evelyn Hart began writing the ending. The humiliation didn't stop after that meeting. It evolved. Evelyn Hart noticed the shift the way only system architects do, not as chaos, but as a pattern. Access permissions quietly vanished. Her admin credentials were downgraded without notice. Files she'd authored for years suddenly required approval from people who couldn't spell API, let alone understand it. She didn't complain. She documented each change log, each timestamp, every approval rerouted around her. She printed backups at home, saved encrypted copies in cold storage, cross-referenced employee manuals, vendor contracts, and compliance clauses most executives never read past the headers. Richard Cole mistook her silence for surrender. In public, he grew bolder. He mocked her diagrams during meetings, rolling his eyes as his son Logan lounged beside him, nodding along like a trained parrot. We don't need all these boxes and arrows, Richard scoffed. Agility means trusting instinct. Evelyn made another mark in the margin of her notebook. She remembered how systems failed when instinct replaced process. She remembered the Sunday she'd saved the customer archive alone while leadership slept. She remembered who signed off on what, and who never bothered to read the fine print. At night, after the apartment lights dimmed and the city quieted, Evelyn worked, not on rebellion, but on structure. She ensured her name wasn't attached to anything new. Nothing half-built. Nothing Logan could later blame on her when it collapsed. She reviewed a framework she'd written months earlier during a vendor overhaul, a compliance contingency clause. It was legal. Approved. Signed. Buried deep inside operational policy, where executives rarely looked. The trigger condition was simple. If a project lead was replaced within 14 business days of a critical compliance submission, accountability transferred automatically to the executive who initiated the change. The clause wasn't punishment, it was protection. A safeguard for reckless leadership. She checked the timestamp. 13 days remained. Meanwhile, Logan Cole announced his vision. He cancelled vendor review calls, dismissed documentation as legacy clutter, and replaced weekly risk assessments with something he proudly called alignment jams. "We'll figure it out as we go," he said, lighting a vanilla-scented candle on her old desk. People stopped asking Evelyn questions. They started whispering instead, in hallways, in private group chats, over coffee they never finished. Things were breaking, slowly. Invoices stalled. Access mismatched. Systems hesitated like they were waiting for permission that would never come. Evelyn watched none of it from the office. On the morning Richard finally called her into conference room C, she arrived early, as always. Her bag was already packed. Her badge lay on top, next to a neatly labeled folder. She didn't know the exact moment the collapse would begin. But she knew the countdown had already started. Evelyn Hart's termination was clean, quiet, and painfully rehearsed. Richard Cole didn't even sit down. He leaned against the table in conference room C, arms crossed, wearing the satisfied smile of a man who believed history favored confidence over competence. Beside him stood Marissa Vale from HR, clutching a thin folder with Evelyn's name typed neatly on the tab. "We are moving in a different direction," Richard said. "Nothing personal." Evelyn blinked once. Marissa slid the folder across the table. "Severance details. Transition language. Carefully neutral words designed to make displacement feel humane." Evelyn didn't open it. "Who's replacing me?" she asked calmly. Richard didn't hesitate. "Logan." The word hung in the air longer than it should have. Logan Cole, 26, loud, credentialed only by inheritance, smiled like he'd just won something. He hadn't written a line of production code in his life. Once, he'd asked Evelyn if encryption was basically just password layering. Marissa cleared her throat. "This is effective immediately, but you'll have today to collect your belongings." "How generous," Evelyn said, her voice flat as ice on glass. She stood. No shaking hands. No arguments. Her bag was already under the table, laptop, charger, notebooks, one sealed envelope labeled Q3 compliance backup. She handed her badge to Marissa, not Richard. That mattered. Richard tried to soften it. "No hard feelings. Maybe you can consult later, help Logan get oriented." Evelyn met his eyes for the first time. Not anger. Not hurt. Just distance. "I'm sure he'll be fine," she said. "He seems confident." And she left. Logan took over before her chair was cold. By noon, he unplugged her dual-monitor setup and replaced it with his MacBook and a novelty stress ball. He called an impromptu meeting, no agenda, just enthusiasm. "We're killing legacy complexity," Logan announced. "If you can't explain a system in 60 seconds, it's too complicated." Engineers exchanged looks. Finance stayed silent. Legal took notes. Within hours, Logan cancelled the vendor compliance review, paused contractor payments, and dismissed a flagged audit reminder with a wave of his hand. "We'll streamline it." The systems didn't argue. They waited. That evening, Evelyn sat in her apartment, shoes still on, staring at her phone. A single notification appeared, compliance packet queued. 12 days remaining. She closed her laptop. Some promotions aren't rewards. They are triggers. By Monday morning, the damage wasn't loud. It was quiet. Logan Cole arrived wearing sockless loafers and a blazer with the brand tag still stitched to the sleeve. He strutted through operations like he owned the building, tossing greetings at people who didn't answer. Confidence, after all, didn't require permission. His first official act was symbolic. He deleted the Legacy Safeguards folder from the shared drive. "Too cluttered," he said. "We're agile now." By noon, cracks appeared. Accounts payable froze 3 contractor invoices due to missing escalation metadata. Logan blamed the finance software. When told Evelyn had manually maintained those permissions through a layered override system, he laughed. "We don't do override matrices anymore. I trust people." The system did not return the favor. 2 engineers lost access during a routine refresh. A sandbox environment wiped itself clean after an unchecked configuration change. Customer support flagged duplicate tickets flooding in from a new automation Logan had approved without review. He waved it off. Temporary noise. Across town, Evelyn Hart sat on her back porch, paperback in hand. She hadn't opened her laptop once. Still, her phone buzzed. "Devon, ops, we lost the master schema. Logan says we don't need it." "Angela, legal, did you leave anything we can reference?" He's deleting configs. "Facilities, badge system locked XX out of the secure floor." Security's furious. Evelyn read every message. She replied to none. Instead, she checked one thing, the access logs. Logan had attempted entry into her private documentation archive at 1:42 a.m. and again at 1:57. Both times, denied. The folder had been wiped clean before she left. Panic always arrived between midnight and sunrise. On Tuesday, Logan sent a company-wide email titled, "A New Era Begins Rocket." It promised speed, empowerment, and freedom from outdated complexity. Technical questions were redirected to his assistant, a 23-year-old named Kelsey, who forwarded everything to a junk folder labeled later. No answers came. By Wednesday, 3 independent contractors walked off the job, 29 days unpaid. Their exit email contained one line that spread internally like wildfire: "This is not an Evelyn problem. This is a leadership decision problem." In the office kitchens and private chats, people whispered. Not accusations. Observations. Something was unraveling. Logan, meanwhile, ordered a foosball table. At exactly 3 p.m., Evelyn's calendar event marked lunch with Dad switched to completed. 7 minutes later, in a server room hundreds of miles away, a silent process woke up. A clock had started. Janice Moore was not a rebel. She wore cardigans with embroidered birds and color-coded every folder she touched. She believed in process, not politics. And she knew something was wrong. On Tuesday morning at 8:01 a.m., Janice sent a careful email to Richard Cole. Subject: Phase 2 Regulatory Review Confirmation, just confirming leadership representation for the Phase 2 documentation prepared under Evelyn Hart. Are we still aligned for Thursday's federal review? She attached the tracking sheet Evelyn had built months earlier. Every pending field highlighted. Every dependency mapped. Richard didn't reply. Logan did. At 10:36 a.m., Janice received a single-line response: "We're good. We don't need that dinosaur process anymore. We are running agile now." No greeting. No signature. Janice read it twice. Then she printed it. She slid the page into the back of her just-in-case folder, the same one HR once called unnecessary and Evelyn had called responsible. That afternoon, Apex Delta officially terminated their contract. 29 days unpaid. Their exit notice cited leadership-directed workflow removal resulting in non-compliance exposure. Legal flagged it. Logan ignored it. Finance froze additional payments. Engineering requested emergency access restoration. Logan denied it. If the system can't handle change, it shouldn't exist. At 2:53 p.m., Devon from operations texted Evelyn, they ignored Phase 2. Janice is panicking. Evelyn didn't answer. She checked her calendar. A single event blinked green, then grey. 3 p.m. Completed at that exact moment, in a quiet compliance server cluster, an automated routine triggered. A file assembled itself. Time-stamped. Verified. Embedded in a dormant compliance thread marked inactive weeks ago. The subject line was intentionally dull: Q3 audit notice. Alternate route. The system didn't understand ego. It understood conditions. Project lead reassigned inside the protected window. Phase 2 incomplete. Override documentation missing. At 3:08 p.m., the board's compliance inbox received an email. 17 pages. The first line read, per Internal Policy 2237F, subsection 9b, this notice confirms the triggering of the liability transfer window due to leadership reassignment within the protected timeframe. By 3:12, the chairman's assistant had opened it. By 3:19, legal was alerted. At 3:41, Richard Cole received a calendar invite titled, Emergency Executive Session, Mandatory Attendance. He stared at the screen. Across town, Evelyn poured herself a glass of wine and removed herself from the last admin panel she still had access to. The system was no longer hers. But the consequences were. The boardroom felt colder than usual. Not because of the air conditioning, but because no one was speaking. Laptops were open, untouched. Coffee sat cooling in branded cups no one lifted. The projector hummed, waiting. Richard Cole stood near the head of the table, straightening his tie for the third time. Logan lounged in Evelyn Hart's old chair, foot hooked around the leg like he belonged there. At 9:02 a.m., the door opened. Chairman Harold Whitman entered without a word. No entourage. No small talk. Rain darkened the shoulders of his suit. He placed a leather folio on the table and looked around the room once, slowly. His eyes stopped at the empty seat. "Where is Evelyn?" he asked. Richard laughed, too quickly. "She's moved on. Decided to pursue other opportunities. Logan's leading operations now." Logan half smiled, lifting two fingers in a casual wave. Whitman didn't return it. He opened the folio and slid a printed document across the table. This arrived in the board's compliance inbox 2 days ago. The header was unmistakable. Change of project owner, contingency notice, regulatory phase 2, legal sat upright. Compliance froze. Whitman continued, voice even. This clause activates when a project lead is reassigned within 14 business days of final submission. Accountability transfers permanently to the initiating executive. Richard's face drained of color. That can't be binding. Whitman flipped to page 6. Signature. Timestamp. Legal validation. Silence pressed down hard. Angela from legal spoke carefully. It's valid. Logan leaned forward. But everything's working. We streamlined. Devon, seated near the wall, finally spoke. 3 systems missed compliance snapshots. 2 were in sandbox mode during the lock period. 1 hasn't logged an audit trail since Evelyn was removed. Angela added, Apex Delta's withdrawal triggered a review freeze. No override was filed. Richard slammed his hand on the table. Fix it. You can't backdate compliance, Angela said quietly. Not under Phase 2. Whitman closed the folder. Here's what happens next, he said. Richard, you are accountable. Logan, return your badge. Compliance will initiate emergency restoration. Legal will begin interviews. Logan's mouth opened. No sound came out. Richard stared at the table like it had betrayed him. On the screen behind them, the system refreshed. Dashboards reappeared. Audit trails rebuilt. Permissions realigned. One name glowed at the top. System owner, Evelyn Hart Whitman stood. People thought she was a dinosaur, he said softly. She wasn't. She was the firewall. No one argued. No one could. There was no announcement. No press release. No internal memo celebrating accountability or apologizing for mistakes. Apex Dynamics simply changed. Logan's access was terminated before noon. His name vanished from org charts by evening. The company badge he'd worn like a trophy was placed in an evidence envelope, not a desk drawer. Richard Cole lasted longer. 3 weeks, to be exact. During those weeks, he sat through interviews with compliance, legal, and external auditors. Each meeting followed the same pattern: polite questions, precise references, and documents he didn't remember approving but clearly had. Every trail led back to the same moment. The day Evelyn Hart was removed. The board never asked her to return. They didn't need to. By the time the audit concluded, Apex Delta quietly reactivated negotiations. Not with Richard. Not with Logan. With Evelyn. Her new consulting firm occupied a modest corner office with no logo on the door. She preferred it that way. Fewer assumptions. Better listening. When Apex Delta's legal team reached out, she replied with a single sentence: I no longer override systems. I designed them. The contract they signed was smaller than before, but ironclad. Her name appeared only once, in the ownership clause. Back at Apex Dynamics, systems stabilized. Processes slowed. People double-checked decisions. Meetings ended with questions instead of applause. Richard Cole resigned on a Friday afternoon. No farewell email. No LinkedIn post about new chapters. Just an empty office and a disabled login. At 6 p.m., the company-wide directory updated. Interim CEO, Harold Whitman. No comments were enabled. That night, Evelyn walked home in the rain, coat buttoned, hands free. Her phone buzzed once. Janice Moore had sent a photo. A small bird embroidered on a cardigan sleeve. Under it, one line of text: they fixed the folder structure. Like you said. Evelyn smiled. Power didn't always roar. Sometimes it waited. Documented. Time-stamped. Unavoidable. She had never needed revenge. Only patience, and a system that remembered everything.